Well, it is going to be scary to start your own business. Let me tell you that much. I was tired of obviously having side hustles that I was only half bought into. And I obviously live in California, so the fixed expenses here are...
It is no surprise that homes in California don't come cheap.
I probably left the corporate world with maybe $30,000 to $40,000, but I didn't have more than that for sure. And that's definitely not 24 months of supporting myself. I'm gonna say that much. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, and you need to work on something that you're really, really excited about and passionate about. Do you consider yourself a high achiever? Smart, driven, highly successful? I am so excited to have you. My name is Julia Arndt, and I'm the host of the Stress Podcast. I will help you develop your stress resilience the same way you've developed your workplace superpowers. Learn peak performance tools to thrive at work and in your personal life. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome back to the Stress Podcast. I'm your host, Julia Arndt, and I'm so excited that you are here today in order to chat with me about how to become an entrepreneur in 2023. Yes, I am taking the time today to sit down with you together and chat with you a little bit about my experience of how I started my business in 2019 and all of the things that I learned along the way and all of the recommendations that I would give today if I would start again. I get these questions all the time, and I'm actually coaching a lot of people on these different questions in my business today as well. And I love to sit down and record these podcast episodes for you because it's always a really good time for me as well to reflect on all of the things that have happened over the last 4.5 years. If you're listening to this podcast for the very first time and you don't know who I am, welcome to the Stress Podcast. I'm so excited that you are here. I worked actually in corporate America over 7.5 years before I started my own business in February of 2019. And let me tell you, I've learned so many things along the way. And it's really powerful to sit down and chat. So I am super excited to jump into all of the learnings of how to become an entrepreneur in 2023. And I would say, let's jump right in. Hi, and welcome back. I am super excited to be here with you today. I'm so grateful that you are taking the time to listen to this podcast and to reflect with me together on how can you actually get started. I know that for many of you, this is a really big question that you're currently, or maybe even constantly asking yourself. So we're going to dive into all of these different questions today. And I have also a couple of different bonus answers to questions for you that you asked me on my Instagram account. If you remember, I asked you a couple of weeks ago if I were to record a podcast episode on how to start a business or how to become an entrepreneur in 2023, what kind of questions would you ask me? And I got some really good questions, and I want to answer 3 of those in the podcast today. Those 3 questions are: number 1, how did you make the transition into your business full time, and how was your journey? Number 2, how to set up a business from a legal perspective, and how do you get paid? And number 3, which acquisition channels do you recommend? So those are the 3 questions that I want to answer today. Later on in the podcast, I want to start with just kind of my general tips of the things that I have been taking away from entrepreneurship over the last couple of years, and then we'll jump into those questions as well. So let's take a deep breath. And let's talk about entrepreneurship. Why? Because entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. And I've had so many learnings over the course of the last 4.5 years and longer, because fun fact for those of you that didn't know, this is actually not the first business that I started in my lifetime. I actually started 2 other businesses before I started this business, and before I also decided to make the transition and this business full time. So the other 2 businesses that I created and started before this one were an Amazon an Amazon business, so an Amazon store selling products on Amazon. And the second one was a yoga business with providing yoga classes to people here in Lake Tahoe. Both of these businesses didn't make it, in the sense of I just decided at some point down the road that was not what I wanted to do full time, because I wasn't passionate enough about it enough. And I also didn't believe that I could make a living out of that full time. And that doesn't mean at all that you can't do that with an Amazon business, or that you can't do it with providing yoga classes to a community. I absolutely believe that if you believe in your business, then you will absolutely be able to do that. But for me, there was a different answer. And it took me a really long time to get to that answer. In fact, I would say I experimented with these different ideas for about 3 years before I started this business. And they really still helped me to gain the confidence and obviously clarity of what I really wanted to do. And I would say that is the very first big strategy and tip that I want to share with you today. I want you to really be clear on what is it that you want to offer. Who is your audience? What is your initial pricing? So have a really clear plan about what you want to do, obviously, right? If you are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur in 2023, you first of all have to get really clear on what is it that you want to do. Is it a product that you want to offer? Is it a service that you want to offer? Is it a combination of both of these things? Or do you start with offering a service and later on you're offering also physical products, right? There's all these different kinds of combinations that are available to you. And it is all super fun and also very challenging at times, because when you are moving from your corporate job most of the time, right? From a corporate job or from a fixed employment where you're making money every single month to entrepreneurship, it is a really big, scary step. And so it is really important, obviously, that you are making sure that what you are betting on is something that you are really believing in. And that is so, so important, especially because this is what you're going to spend your 40 or 50 or maybe even at the beginning 60-hour work week on at the beginning. And not just at the beginning, but even a year later or 2 years later and 3 years later and 4 years later. And for some of you, this might be really scary, right? Because maybe that is keeping you from starting to be an entrepreneur, because you're like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I am really, really excited about to make that huge decision to let go of all of the corporate cushiness, of all of the corporate benefits and all of the corporate advantages that you have to start your own business. And so there's a balance, right? There's a balance between, you obviously have to be passionate and excited about the project that you are thinking about taking on full time. And at the same time, obviously don't be numbed by the fear of, am I really that excited about this to make this a long-term thing? The cool thing that I've learned about entrepreneurship is that obviously you can shift and you can change things as well. So for example, I completely rebranded this business from 2019 to 2020 because I just didn't connect as well with the first company name that I had chosen. And I just thought there is a better name out there that better reflects the work that I actually do. And it took me a year to figure that out from obviously having that work experience. So don't let yourself, numb yourself, or don't let those things keep you from starting, or like don't have these things hold you back. This is super, super important, right? So there's a balance between the two. And that is the first thing. So be really clear on what you want to do. You can brainstorm, maybe you already have an idea, and then get really clear already on who's your audience, maybe the initial pricing, because obviously you want to make sure that you're also creating something that you believe that you can make money with, right? Because at the end of the day, that is still important, even though it is exciting to start a business and it is exciting that you want to that you want to start your own business, but it obviously also has to support you, because if that's not the case, then things can get scary really quickly, and then you might run back to your corporate job. So be really clear on what you want to do. That's my first tip and first strategy that I think is super, super important when you want to become an entrepreneur in 2023. The second step that is super important and something that I thought a lot about over the last maybe 6 months before I left my corporate job was the question, how do I exit, right? Plan your exit. So that's the second step that I think is really important, is to have some funds and savings available, to focus on the right priorities, especially at the beginning, to not have a tight budget right from the start, and to put your business, your really new little business, under a lot of pressure. So it really was helpful for me to have funds and savings available, to know I can really experiment. I can really invest in my business in the right way. I can set it up in the right way, the way I believe it in. And I would say, don't just even have savings for the first year. You should always have some savings, but I think you should even maybe plan for 2 years. And the way of how you should think about that is, think about how many expenses fixed you have on a monthly basis. So sit down, create a list of all of the different things that you are spending your money on, your rent and your electricity and your phone bill and your gas bill and your internet bill and your TV bill maybe, or all of the software that you're using currently, right? Like your Spotify account and your Apple cloud storage or whatever it is, right? Create a list of all of the fixed expenses that you have on a monthly basis, plus obviously groceries and some fun money, because, you know, if you only invest in your business and in your fixed expenses, that's obviously no fun, and you need to make sure that you obviously also take care of yourself. So plan a little bit of budget for that, and then multiply it by 24. So 24 months, and that is approximately the savings and the funds that you should have in your savings account. Did I have that much money in my savings account when I left the company? No, I didn't. But if I would be a little bit wiser today, I obviously am, after 4.5 years of running this business, I would tell myself, be really clear that you have enough money in your bank account that will support you over the course of 2 years without blinking an eye, because it's just a nicer way to start from there. It feels so much safer. And I always thought, I don't want to start my business being super worried about money. And I'm trying to remember how much money I actually had when I left. And I obviously live in California, so the fixed expenses here are a lot more expensive than maybe other countries or other states. And I probably left the corporate world with maybe $30,000 to $40,000. This is honestly kind of a wild guess, but I didn't have more than that for sure. And that's definitely not 24 months of supporting myself. I'm going to say that much. And I did have some stocks as well, that were kind of like my safe bet in case something was to go wrong. So that was really important to plan that exit and to plan some savings and some funds in order to make sure that when I leave, I don't feel like I need to immediately make money and immediately make a lot of money in order to cover all of the expenses that I have on a monthly basis. So that's a really important one, and something that I highly encourage you to plan and think about before you leave your job and start your business. The next tip that I have for you is a really good one. I'm laughing about it as I'm looking here through my notes, because I see this all the time from people that are wanting to start a business and at the same time they're super scared. Well, it is going to be scary to start your own business. Let me tell you that much. It's a super unknown space, uncertain space, right? Because you don't know how people are going to respond to this. And we'll talk a little bit about as well of, should I start my business before I leave my job? Let me talk about that for sure. But let's start about that third step and that third point that I have here. So the third thing that I have written down as a tip or strategy is, don't spend too much time building a website or social media. Just get started. What I focused on when I started my business was to have a website, which was super easy to build with Wix. It took me a day to build that website because it is really so easy. And I mean, what kind of information do you need to have on your website at the beginning? Your services, maybe your pricing, and how to contact you, and maybe who you are, right? That is something that you can literally write up in a day and just post it on Wix. That's as easy as it is. For me, it was really important to have some good pictures of myself for me, it was also really important that the website looked really professional, because what I wanted to do was to work with Fortune 500 companies, tech companies. And so it was really important for me to look super professional. So, that's a really good thing to think about as well, is if you are starting your business, who is your audience and how do you want to present yourself? What do you think is necessary in order to attract that audience? And so for me, it was to have a really good but professional looking website, good photos, and then some type of testimonials, character skill endorsements from previous colleagues and clients. And that is obviously something that you can prepare, even though you might not have a lot of experience yet in the business that you're actually creating. So if you don't have that, don't worry about that too much. It's obviously a nice to have, and it will probably help you jumpstart a little bit faster, but it is not necessary. And so the reason why I said I'm kind of smiling about this strategy as I'm reading through it is because I know that a lot of people get hung up on building a website and building their business before they're actually going out to offer their services. Why is it in kind of brackets or in air quotes so ridiculous? It is because you need to make sure that obviously your target audience is interested in the product or services that you're trying to offer. You need to gain some clarity if the market is ready for your product and service. So let's say you spend 2 years behind the scenes building an incredibly beautiful website and the most incredible professionally looking pictures and the most professional text and marketing messages. And then finally you launch it after a year or two and nobody's interested. Well, you spent a lot of time and money and energy in something that nobody's maybe interested in. So you want to not be worried about that step, right? People always think I need to have a super professional looking Instagram with hundreds of posts. I need to have a super professional looking YouTube channel with hundreds of videos, or you need a podcast, or you need this, right? We have all of these conceived notions of this is what I need to do and this is what I need to have in order to be successful at starting my business. But let me tell you this, not important. Like I said, it literally takes a day to start and build a website with Wix. It's so easy, and Wix is not paying me for this, but I really love Wix. I actually tried out another platform. Let me think what it was called. What is the other internet provider? Oh, Squarespace. I actually dabbled a little bit with Squarespace because of the other companies that I had previously started, and I didn't like Squarespace. I think it is super unuser friendly, and the way of how I wanted my work website to look wasn't possible because the templates that they were using were not really easily to change, and you needed to know code. At least that's what it was 4.5 years ago. Do your research, choose what works best for you. I obviously don't want to guide you in one direction or the other, but what I still use today is Wix. Why did I decide to build my own website instead of hiring somebody to do it? Because I can change my website at any freaking point in time, and it is so nice. If I choose to navigate or shift my business in any way or the other, I can go on my Wix, I can create a new landing page and put in all of the information and get it live in less than 24 hours. And that was super important for me. And that might not be a skill that you have, and that's okay. And then hire a website builder, right? So there's no right or wrong. I'm just sharing a little bit more about my own personal experience today and how I think about things. But the biggest takeaway for me, for you here, is please don't get hung up on building the perfect website or the perfect social media channels in order to get started. That's usually something that you do in order to kind of hide yourself because you are kind of still scared to go out in this big scary world. but that's going to keep you from actually starting to make money and connecting with the people that you actually want to help. So that's a really important strategy. So now let me plug in this other thing that I've just been talking a little bit about, which is that really big question about, should you start your business while you are still working for your company? This is a really big question. And I have seen people do both things. Long story short, I didn't do that. When I started this business, I had nothing. I started this podcast in January of 2019. And then I left corporate America on January 31st of 2019. And then I started this business on February 1st, 2019. And that's when I started literally everything. I started the website. I really got started with the podcast, my Instagram page, and so on and so on. I didn't have anything. I didn't have any clients. I didn't really have any testimonials or anything like that. I started completely from scratch. Now, I know coaches that have actually ran their business as a side hustle next to their corporate job. And that's okay as well. I think it always depends on what you want to do and what works for you. My experience, especially because I built two other businesses on the side while I had a corporate job before, and those weren't businesses that I really believed in, to be honest. It just took a lot of time and energy away from my corporate job at the time, which wasn't the main problem. I think the main problem was that I didn't invest all the energy that I could have invested in those businesses, and maybe they would have worked out great as well. But yeah, I think you should always think about that. If you already feel pretty burnt out and stressed with your job, then starting a side hustle obviously requires 10 to 20 hours of time investment per week as well. So be really honest and realistic with yourself and ask yourself the question, do I actually have that time? Especially if you have a family, if you have children, if you have a super, super busy job, do you really, honestly, realistically have the time to start it as a side hustle? If the answer is yes, great, because then you can obviously build a little bit of the momentum. You can see if your services and products are really what people want. You can really already collect testimonials. You can create all networks and connections. You can start a social media channel, right? You can do these things and get going. And some people like that because they feel more secure when they actually leave. Do you need that in order to be successful? No, you don't. Because as you can see, I started this business in 2019 without any preparation or without any connections or contacts beforehand. And I was still very successful already, even in my first year. And I just wanted to be fully present for this business when I started this, because I was tired of obviously having side hustles that I was only half bought into. So I'm going to say it again. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, and you need to work on something that you're really, really excited about and passionate about. Why is that so important? Well, because entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, and there will be small challenges and medium big challenges and really big challenges that you're going to face along the way. And if you're not absolutely convinced about what you're doing, you're not absolutely excited and passionate about the work that you do, it's going to be very hard to keep on going. It is just that way. It's so, so true. And I've had multiple situations over the last 4.5 years where things got really scary. I'm just thinking about the start of the pandemic in March 2020. I was a year and 2 months, or yeah, a year and a month, a year and 2 months into the business. And all of a sudden, all of my corporate clients cut their budgets. It was a super uncertain time, and people didn't know what was going to happen. And that was super, super scary for my business and for myself, because my business is me, right? And so you have to be prepared for these things, and you have to be passionate enough to keep on going. And that's what I did, because I really believed that I could help people. I really wanted to connect with people. And that brings me to two things that I think are incredibly important to know and to do when you are becoming an entrepreneur in 2023. And I'm going to say this as well. I probably already talked about this. If you remember, I published a podcast episode at the beginning of this year. I think it was in January, and it was called How to Start a Business in 2023, because I've just been getting so many questions about this over the last couple of months. And I did talk about these two tools or strategies, but I am going to highlight it again because I feel like the first podcast that I recorded about this topic was more generic, and today we're really going to start talking about entrepreneurship. And so, what are the two tools? Number one, diversify your income. Don't put all eggs in one basket. And I've had, again, many conversations with clients, with other coaches about this. And entrepreneurship is not always easy, especially at the beginning. It can be easy, and I hope that you will have the belief going into entrepreneurship that it can be easy, and it's okay to have challenges because they guide you in the right direction that you should be going in anyway. But still diversify yourself. That's just a hot tip because yeah, it is obviously the business that makes you money in order to live your life. And if no money is coming in, it's going to be very hard to live your life. So diversify your income. The way of how I did that was I actually bought a house in 2016 here in Lake Tahoe. And so I had rental income during especially that very scary time in 2020 when I didn't make really a lot of money for, I don't even know, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months or so. And then I also diversified within my business. So I have obviously a one-on-one coaching arm. I have corporate coaching and trainings. I have passive income streams. I have programs, online programs. I have the podcast, which obviously I actually don't make money with the podcast or with my YouTube channel just yet, but those are kind of my long-term bets on how I'm going to make money over the long run. And I think it's really important to think about these things ahead of time and to set yourself up for success and to just create a strategy and a system on how often you actually want to produce content or how you want to set up your business to be successful and how to make money. So that's really important. That's tip number 4, diversify your income. And then number 5, offer free trainings and free consulting. Get experience as quickly as possible because to my experience, and I know I talked about this in the other podcast as well, and I do still highly encourage you to listen to that podcast episode as well, because it's just going to give you even more insights into how I think about building a business and how I became an entrepreneur. But I was actually really scared about offering things for free at the beginning. And over the course of time, I learned that sometimes, because of the economy, maybe there's not a chance to make money, but there's a chance to network, which will eventually lead you to make money. So in 2020, in March, when all of my companies cut their budgets for corporate trainings, I offered a lot of free trainings. I offered a lot of virtual trainings and just workshops and meetings with people in order to connect with people, in order to build my network, in order to do business development. And eventually I was able to charge money from those people, and it was people that had seen me talk during that difficult time for free. And so I never really actually believe anymore that things are for free. I think that eventually it will all come around because you're planting really important seeds that are really important in order to, just keep you going. So don't be afraid of doing that. I think it's really helpful for you because it will really help you to guide you in the right direction of what do you enjoy doing? What kind of insights do you gain from the clients that you work with? The testimonials are so important. And one of the things, and I think again I talk about this in the other podcast episode, is I actually hired a photographer that came with me to my first corporate workshop that I offered for free. So I paid a lot of money for that first corporate workshop because I had to travel to Chicago. I had to pay for the travel for my photographer and obviously for the pictures that she did for me. But that was incredible exposure for me, an incredible way to market myself afterwards. And I did get 2 one-on-one coaching clients from that gig for a very long period of time. And so what I mean by that is they I was working with those two clients, one for 1 year and the other one for 3 or 4 years. And so that was obviously totally worth my investment overall, right? So this is kind of how I think about this. And I think that's really important to keep in mind when you're starting your own business and when you want to become an entrepreneur. Idea number 6 is build systems. I am pretty passionate about building systems, in case you haven't noticed yet. I obviously talk about productivity even in the Peak Performance Method program, because I believe that you need systems and you need tools in order to set yourself up for success. I did that by getting really clear very, very early on, literally in the first week of starting my business, of how much content I wanted to produce. And that might not be the thing for you. It might not be the content that you produce. It might be the number of clients that you want to connect with on a weekly or monthly basis, or, it can be really anything, but just get clear on, obviously, what is it that you want to do? Who are you targeting? What are the different income streams that you have, and then obviously break that down into what are the acquisition channels, where do these people come from, and then create systems around that. For me, it was obviously the podcast, it was the YouTube channel, it was my Instagram account, it was my LinkedIn, and getting really clear on how often do I actually want to be present on these channels. And let me tell you, especially at the beginning, you feel like you're putting yourself out there and you get maybe 1 like, if at all, or you get 1 view, or you get 10 views or 10 listens. And it might feel super, super frustrating for you. But I always reminded myself that that's not the most important thing, because even if it's just 1 person or 10 people, that's a lot of people. I sometimes go back thinking about, go into a room with 1 person, or go into a room and speak to 5 people or 10 people. That's a lot of lives that you're actually touching. And so celebrate those really small wins and don't get hung up and use that as an excuse to discontinue. That's a really, really important thing. If I would have gotten discouraged by that, I wouldn't be sitting here anymore today. And as I am recording this today, I've had the biggest number of downloads on this podcast since I started this podcast in 4.5 years. I think on average, to be super transparent with you, on average over the last 4 years, I had about 300 to 500 podcast downloads per week. And sometimes, of course, that obviously started to increase. And that was not at the beginning, right? When I first started this podcast, maybe 20 or 30 people listened to this podcast. But over time, I would say it kind of found this average of 300 to 500 podcast downloads per week. And then, of course, here and there, I would have like a big week where it was like 1,000 podcast downloads per week or 700 podcast downloads per week. And I always celebrated that. I always kept an eye on those kind of analytics. And over the last 3 weeks, something really weird has been happening and shifting. So 3 weeks ago, I had 500 podcast downloads per week. The week after, I had about 1,500 podcast downloads per week, which is really a lot. And I don't think over the last 4.5 years, I've ever had that many podcast downloads. So I really celebrated that. I looked at the numbers and I was like, wow, this is so, so cool. I'm so excited about this. And then this week, I get an email from my podcast provider every Monday with a summary of all of the statistics. And this week, I had 2,500 podcast downloads for that last week. That's mind-blowing. I've never had anything close to this number. And this is what keeps me going. And this is what happened for the first time in 4.5 years. That's a lot of podcast episodes that I have been recording in between when I started and now to get to this number. And I don't expect this to be there again next week. It could be back to 300 and 500. And so I really, unfortunately, you don't always have insights into why all of a sudden your podcast is starting to be listened to more often. But I just trust the process, and I trust that things will multiply over time. And It's really cool. I'm very proud of that. And why did I actually talk about this? Oh, we talk about building systems. So yeah, so build those systems. Don't be discouraged at the beginning when the numbers look really small. Celebrate every little person. Every little person, that sounds really stupid. Every person that is listening, every person that is liking, every person that is commenting, because those are your people. And yeah, building systems is really important. I do use quite a lot of different systems. At this point, I use Asana for my editor. I'm using, oh my God, I use so much different software in order to set up all of my different systems. Maybe time for another podcast. If you're curious about it, let me know. And I'm super happy to record a podcast episode or YouTube video about it. But I'm not going to get more into this. But build your systems, really important. And then stick to your plan. That's also really important. And then the last tip for today that I have before we're going into the bonus questions that you asked me that I want to chat with you a little bit more about is last tip, use your network. When you are starting as an entrepreneur, use your network. Share with people what you're doing, connect with people, make sure that you build that network, make sure that you are connecting with the people. The reason why I say this is I worked for Google for 7.5 years. There was a company internal site called Teams, where you had access to everyone at Google really, really easily. You just went on there, you searched for their name, and you could connect with them. You had their email address and so on. And obviously that completely went away for me when I left the company. And so I really turned to LinkedIn to provide me with that network. So I really heavily invested in LinkedIn and spend a lot of time on the platform in order to connect with old people, connect with people obviously that I worked with in the past, asked for endorsements, asked for recommendations, asked for insights, asked people to be my first guinea pigs when I started my first programs, all these different things. So use your network because your network, this is kind of where everything starts. And when I talk with other coaches about this and other entrepreneurs, they always tell me their network was their most important thing. And honestly, we underestimate the power of our own networks, and we think, oh, who is really on there, right? Who's really listening or who's really watching? But there are people that are paying attention. So make sure that you are using that as a jumping board for your success. So those are the 7 tips that I have for you today to become an entrepreneur in 2023. And now I want to talk with you a little bit about the bonus questions. So I already announced them at the beginning of the podcast. Now let's shift gears and talk about number 1. How did you make the transition into your business full time, and how was your journey? And I actually think that I probably already answered this question pretty well during the podcast today. So, really quick summary again, I did not start this business before I left my corporate job. I started it once I quit my job and left the company, and then I started this business. That was a personal decision because I was burnt out at the time, and I had to make a decision quick because it started to affect my physical and mental health, and I didn't want, obviously, that struggle anymore. And I had already tested out entrepreneurship twice during my time in the corporation, and I learned a lot of things from that, and I gained the confidence I believed that I needed in order to start this business, which was really, really important for me. At that time, when I started this business, I knew how to build a website. I knew the steps that I needed to take in order to be successful. I knew that there was a lot of information available online and that you can just search for these things and you can get started and learn by yourself, right? Learning by doing. That was really helpful for me, and that gave me a lot of confidence to be successful. One of the things that happened literally the first week when I left was I posted on LinkedIn that I'm leaving the company and that I'm starting my own business and what the idea was behind the business. And for some reason, and without understanding at all how LinkedIn worked at the time, this post went viral, and I actually got my first business client out of that post, which was absolutely incredible. It was like a multiple 5-figure deal with a big tech company in Silicon Valley. And I wouldn't have gotten that if I wouldn't have been bold enough to just share what I'm going to do next. So that was really cool and very helpful. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. How did you make the transition into your business full time, and how was your journey? I think that pretty much sums it up. Number 2, how do you get paid legally? How to set up a business from a legal perspective. So that is a good question. I'm obviously going to talk about how to set up your company in the US because that's what my experience is. So if you are listening to this podcast in Germany or in Ireland or in South America or in Australia, hi, all my fans over there. I'm super excited that you're listening to this podcast, and I'm really sorry that I can't give you more insights into how to start your business in those specific countries. I can only talk about the US. In the US, you can literally start making money tomorrow as an entrepreneur, as a sole proprietor, it's called, and you don't need to have any legal structures, which is really, really cool. I think the only thing that I did was that I sent the business name. I kind of created kind of this business name. It was like 30 or 50 bucks, and I sent it to, I don't even know where anymore. I know that's very, very specific, Julia. Well, let me think. I sent it to like a business entity thing, and I basically registered. That was the word that I was looking for. I registered this company name with the business board of whatever franchise company to pay taxes, right? So that's what I did, and then I started, and then I was the first 1 or 2 years, I think 1 year, the first year I was a sole proprietor, which means that you just make money, and all of the money that you make, you basically pay taxes on, and you're fully liable for your business through all of the assets that you own. So for example, my house, my car, everything was a business expense, but it was like if somebody would have sued me in the first year, they could have gone after my car and my house because I was a sole proprietor. And that was a little bit too sketchy for me. And so that was one of the main reasons why I then decided to become a incorporation. There's all different kinds of different legal entities in the US, and there's obviously an LLC, there's an incorporated, there's an S corp. I'm actually an S corp, and there's different benefits, there's different legal prices attached to these different legal entities. So, but there's so much information out there, so don't get discouraged by that. And I had no idea about these things when I started my business. I knew I'm going to be a sole proprietor. It's the most straightforward thing. I don't have to pay any legal fees to register that company. I can just test it out and try it out, right? And so so the reason why I became an incorporation, so an S corp, was because I wanted to protect my personal assets, so my house, my car, right, the things that belong to me. So if somebody is really going after me, which obviously I hope will never happen, then they can't go after these things, right? They can only sue me for my business assets. So so that's kind of how I started to get legally paid. I mean, there's not really how to get legally paid. You can get paid. You just need to make sure that you obviously say that at the end of the tax year that you got paid for these things, right? You need to start basically a process of how you're tracking the money that is coming in. And again, at the beginning, I didn't have like a software for that. At the beginning, I just tracked it with spreadsheets, and every time somebody paid me, I wrote it onto a spreadsheet so I know how much money I made in total at the end of the year. And again, I think those are all these really interesting things that you can get hung up on if you're a little bit scared of starting your business, which is obviously absolutely normal. We've all gone through that. But I was always kind of the mindset of, I rather test it out. I rather just go for it, and I will figure it out along the way. And again, I got that confidence through building those businesses and those other businesses beforehand. And at the same time, also through my responsibilities and roles and learnings and experiences from being a project and program manager at my company, because that is exactly at the end of the day what you do. You kind of project and program manage your own business. So those would be really good skills to have if you want to become an entrepreneur, or you should hire someone that helps you with that. So that's super important. And then you can start to make money. It's as easy as that. And then the last question that you asked me on my Instagram account about how to become an entrepreneur in 2023 was the question, which acquisition channels do I recommend? Do you recommend, Julia? Which acquisition channels do you recommend? This is a really important question. And I would still say, in a way, I haven't 100% fully figured it out. I have obviously my acquisition channels. They are very clear to me. I know exactly in which areas I'm investing in. And I'm still testing things out at the same time. So let me tell you about a couple of different acquisition channels. I already told you about one, which is your network. Your network and referrals is probably the number one acquisition channel that I have, because personal testimonials and personal referrals are just the most powerful thing. That's why you should invest in them right from the start, because people talk to people and they will recommend you if you're doing a great job. My second biggest acquisition channel is LinkedIn. Surprise, surprise, this is where all of my clients are. And I actually set up a pretty elaborate, complex system in 2022, because in 2022, my focus for the business was business development, which was always something that felt incredibly scary to me. And at the same time, I told myself, well, this is how I'm getting paid, and this is how I can bring my message out into the world, by telling more people about it and by being confident that this is really what I am passionate about and where I know I can really help people. So I invested heavily in LinkedIn, and this is, I would say, my number two most biggest acquisition channel today. I do get good business through cold emails, through just really reaching out to people that I don't know yet or that I didn't know before, and to talk with them about the services that I offer. Sounds super scary. It is super scary, especially if you don't consider yourself a very salesy person. And I do still find that sometimes uncomfortable. I've definitely gotten better at it. I've had a lot of practice over the last few years, obviously, to sell myself and sell my business and sell my services. But it still sometimes is tough. So I did actually hire a virtual assistant that helps me with that acquisition channel, just to kind of ease the workload a little bit. And then my third biggest acquisition channel is obviously my social media. Instagram and YouTube, I would say, and podcasts, of course. Okay, so Instagram, podcasts, and YouTube, those are my three big social media channels that I have. If you don't know, because maybe you have not followed me before, but if in case you haven't noticed, I put a ton of effort into building content for you to really help you. This is, at the end of the day, this is why I'm doing this, because I really want to help you. I'm getting these questions from you, and then I'm sitting down and I'm recording my YouTube videos and I'm recording these podcasts in order to help you get that information. And I really love it. I didn't always love it, to be fully honest and transparent with you. Why? Because I didn't have the confidence to know that I can just sit in front of the camera and chat with you, or I can't just sit in front of a microphone and chat to you. That felt super uncomfortable and super weird at the beginning. But I set up a system and I told myself, this is going to be one of my biggest acquisition channels. Maybe, hopefully, in the future, this will be my biggest acquisition channel, because I want to help people and I want them to hear this message. And so I invested in that. And so that is, I would say, number 3 acquisition channel. Number 4, I would say ads. I do run some ads on Facebook and also on YouTube. And then number 5, I would say, is events. Events and also social media, in terms of like getting asked to speak on podcasts. That's actually been a huge acquisition channel. It's very interesting. Also events, for sure. I get asked to speak at events, and I am sometimes doing it, full transparency. I'm like, should I say this on the podcast? But I do sometimes do that for free. If it is the right audience, if it is a big enough audience, if it is either a local event where I know I want to support my local community. I want them to know what I do. I want them to know the tools that I have available for them in order to sustain their performance over time. I do speak. And those are big acquisition channels because, as you now learned in this podcast today, you never do anything for free. It will always come back to you. So those, I would say, are the answers to the 3 bonus questions that you asked me on social media. Thank you so much for those questions. I think they were a great addition to the podcast episode today. And so now that we have completed today's podcast episode, you might wonder, okay, what's next? Where do I start? I still am not sure how to get started or which first step to take. Or is my idea really worth investing in? Or is my idea really worth leaving my corporate job for, right? If you have these questions, if you are unsure, then reach out to me, schedule some time with me. I'm super happy to chat with you through those things. And the other thing, let me think. Oh, yes, the other thing that I wanted to say is my 10-week peak performance method program. Why do I mention that to you? Because I learned over the course of the last 4.5 years that I had a lot of people that actually did the program when they were in this transition phase of starting their business or when they had already started the business, because it really helped them to understand themselves, gain understanding of how to manage their stress, and at the same time go out into the world and do what they want to do. And so if you don't know where to start with the program. Start with the 10-week peak performance method program. You can find the link in the show notes, of course, or on my website. And the peak performance method program will give you the tools, the systems in order to manage your time, to get really clear on what are the important projects, to set boundaries, to work through your mindset issues, your belief system, all of these beautiful, important things. People always give me feedback that that's been so valuable for them. And even though they saw different modules where they were like, what am I really going to learn in this module? Or where they were like, I already know about mindset, or I already know about belief systems, right? They always came back and said, wow, there was a little nugget in there that was actually really, really helpful. And that took me further. So if you're curious, obviously check it out. And if you want to work with me one-on-one, you can reach out as well. So that's all I wanted to share with you today. If you found this podcast episode helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would share this podcast with somebody that you know that is also thinking about starting to become an entrepreneur, or someone that is already an entrepreneur, and share the episode with them and say, this is what Julia recommends. Do you agree with her? Do you have any other tips for me? Is that a pretty exhaustive list? It's probably not. But, ask for other people's insights. And that's the best way on how you can connect with people. So share the podcast episode with the people that you love, with the people that you admire. And also let me know, obviously, how you liked it. I always love to see your 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. So thank you so much if you have already written one. If you haven't, come by and say hi. Say that you enjoy this podcast. Give me a virtual high five. And you can also come to my Instagram account at Julia on Coaching in order to share underneath today's podcast episode your biggest takeaway and learning. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for spending this hour of knowledge and insight. I hope that you found it inspiring and helpful, and maybe it gave you a little bit more confidence to take this maybe a little bit scary step of going into entrepreneurship. I've never regretted it. I love being an entrepreneur, and I hope you will too. So take care of yourself, and I hope to hear you in the next podcast episode.